Hello everyone, welcome to Carnivorous Plants Hub. Today I'm going to be bringing you a video. We're going to be taking some time here and we're going to be repotting these here Venus flytraps that I recently got from Walmart into this planter over here. See, I got a little bit of the substrate in there already. We're going to talk a lot about the substrate planter, and on top of repotting I'm going to be going over some in-depth care tips for Venus flytraps, mostly aimed toward beginners, but some of the stuff does kind of tread into advanced Venus flytrap care. So this is going to be a longer format video. I have been working really hard recently to kind of script and make my videos a little more efficient. I actually just recently came out with a Venus flytrap care in under 10 minutes. If you're in a big hurry and you really just want to blast out some care tips, you can go check that video out. This is definitely going to be longer form. This isn't scripted. This is just going to be kind of me talking about care while I am repotting these. So it's going to go on just a little bit longer. So just a warning up front, I would probably recommend getting a drink, some coffee, something to sip on, and maybe even grabbing a notebook so that you can jot down some notes so that you can come back to some of this care later. Today's video is mainly going to focus on when I bring home one of these Venus flytraps from a big box store. In this case it was Walmart. Just what my process is, what I do step by step, kind of my mindset, and that way even if you decide to do something different than what I chose to do, you'll have some guidance on that as well. The first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to remove these from their little death cubes. As you can see there, you can either cut out these death cubes, you can pull these out from the top. I actually recommend probably just cutting off the bottom and pulling them out from the bottom, mostly because if you pull them out from the top you can accidentally damage the Venus flytraps a little bit. Sometimes they'll close because they get kind of banged up when you pull them out from the bottom coming out the top. Once you get them out, first thing you want to do is you want to toss the death cube away, get rid of that. Ignore the instructions on the back because most of the time the care instructions that they give aren't very good. As a matter of fact, sometimes they can just be downright harmful to the Venus flytraps. Ignore the care instructions that's provided by them. Once you get them out, they will look like this. They usually come in these little planters. Sometimes they'll come in peat moss mix, like this one here is a peat moss mix, and sometimes they'll be in like a sphagnum moss mix. It just kind of depends on the company that sells them. But the next thing I want you to do is, if you look up here in the upper left of the screen, you'll see that there is a free plant tracker and Venus flytrap care guide. I want you to go ahead and download that. It's kind of nice because the plant tracker will help you keep track of plant care and maintenance, so it's really nice to be able to come back to see what you've done. And then the Venus flytrap care sheet will actually give you kind of at a glance care tips, so that if you're not taking notes today, you have sort of a note sheet so you can come back to it at a later time, reference it when you have a question about Venus flytrap care. When you go to my website, I'm actually working on parts of it right now, so if you don't see that there's a form available for you to put your email in, just wait a few seconds and you'll actually receive a pop-up that shows an email and name field. If you just pop it into that pop-up that comes up, you should receive that email within a few minutes with the plant tracker and Venus flytrap care sheet. Alright, you got them out of their death cubes, you got your plant tracker and your care sheet. The next thing that I do is I take some time and I kind of inspect the Venus flytraps. One of the things you're going to want to decide right away is whether or not you're going to replant these. There's definitely some deciding factors on that, and that's what we're going to talk about today, so that I can kind of help you walk through and determine whether or not you think that these need to be repotted or not. Typically for Venus flytraps, it's best to wait to the end of dormancy to repot, so if you don't have to repot these, I recommend that you don't, or even at minimum, if you can keep the plug that you have here and just plug that into a new pot with soil surrounding it, that is also kind of a way to minimize the amount of impact to the roots. But there are going to be some factors that could potentially happen where you will just need to clean the roots off completely, get them out of this substrate, and then repot them brand new into a new planter. One of the things you want to do is you want to smell the substrate. I've already smelled these and they actually smell pretty good. It just smells like dirt. If you smell anything that smells kind of rotten or like really like a boggy, muddy, kind of gross egg smell, then you're probably going to want to repot these, because that means that substrate's not good anymore, and you're going to want to get them out before there's any mold or mildew or anything kind of takes over your flytrap. The next thing is you really want to check the condition of the Venus flytraps. How do they look? Do they pass the eye test? are they sickly looking? Are they off colored? Are they a darker green or like a lighter yellow? A lighter yellow usually means that they're kind of sickly. Do they have pieces missing? Do they look like they've been attacked by insects? Another thing you want to really look for is insect damage, but just kind of, do they pass the eye test? Do they look good? And you can see these ones here. These ones do pass the eye test, and I can promise you I've had several that don't pass the eye test, and more often than not I'm actually repotting these, but these ones look really, really good. They're nice and big. They've got decent color. They're still nice and green. You can see that there's new shoots coming up on almost all of these, which is a good indication that they're still really healthy. So these ones are probably sitting more along the lines of not repotting, but even though I think that they're a good candidate to not repot, I'm still going to repot them, but I'm going to try my best to just pull the plug out here and then just repot the whole plug instead of cleaning the roots off entirely and really disturbing the roots. And then what you get sometimes with that is you get what's called repotting shock. And the Venus flytrap, even though it'll make a recovery, they don't do super great in the first couple weeks of that recovery period. So a lot of times they start to look really bad before they actually get any better, and you'll lose a few traps, and it's kind of frustrating. They'll eventually snap out of it, at least they usually do, but the less that you can bother the roots in this process, the better. So even if you're just going to repot this plug, that's better than removing the whole plant altogether, completely cleaning it off. But there's definitely be some circumstances where you're going to want to do that. Bad soil, critters, and if the Venus flytraps just don't look good, you're going to want to repot them entirely. So one of the main tests that I perform to determine if I'm going to keep the substrate and if I have to do anything before I replant these is I really want to test the water runoff and see if the water runoff from the substrate is a high parts per million with my TDS meter over here. If it's a really high TDS, I want to flush these several times before I repot them to make sure I get the dissolved solids out of the water. And we're going to talk more about that here in just a little bit when we talk about water for Venus flytraps. But let's go ahead and do that real quick so we can see if we need to flush these. Okay, so real quick, what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be flushing. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get a saucer or a little dish like this one here that's going to catch the water. What we're going to do is we're going to run the water through the plant. We're going to top water it, and then we're going to measure the TDS of the water as it comes through the other end. This will give us an idea of whether or not we need to continue to flush this plant. And I'll kind of show you what I mean. So let me go ahead and run this water through here. Now if there's any dissolved solids in this substrate here that we have, the water is going to catch it and pull it out the bottom, and it's going to run into this water here. So let's go ahead and grab the TDS meter. We will talk more about a TDS meter here in a little bit as well, but basically what this does is it measures the dissolved solids in the water, and it gives you a ppm number right here. These are super affordable. They're like 10-15 bucks. I got a link in the description from Amazon if you want to check it out, but basically the way that this works is I'm going to put this in the water and it's going to give us a reading. Alright, so right there you can see it's measuring a 56. I don't know if you can see that. I think you can see that, but the standard for Venus flytraps is 50. You want to be under 50 parts per million. Now, myself personally, I like to try to get the water under 20 parts per million. Those dissolved solids, what they do is they're going to harm your Venus flytrap. They burn the roots. Usually it's mostly salts and different kinds of minerals, and those really will burn the roots of a Venus flytrap. They're kind of unique in that they need a substrate and a water that's low in any minerals or salt content. And what that is that's what this is measuring, is how many parts per million of salt or other minerals, dissolved solids, are in the water. And that's how we come up with that 56 number. So 56 parts per million. So what we need to do is we need to get that down a little bit, which is going to, so now what we're going to do is we're going to continue to do this flush a few more times, and that's going to get those parts per million down. All right, so I emptied the dish. Let's go ahead and do this again. The water in this should be reading a 0. I actually use a 0 water pitcher, so this water going in would read a 0 parts per million. It's going through the substrate and then it's coming out 56. A lot of people would leave a 56, and that's probably okay, especially if you plan on repotting once a year, but this one I might not be repotting as much, so I'm going to try to get this down just a little bit because I'm putting these in a bigger planter that's going to be harder to repot as often. So I'd really like this planter to last a couple of years, so I'm going to go ahead and flush this a little bit just to get this down so that we don't have to repot it as often. Another kind of cool tip for flushing, when you're hitting a rain, if you're keeping your Venus flytraps outside and it's a rainstorm, just leave your plant outside, pull it out of its tray that you've been watering it with, and just let the rain go through the bottom and out. Just let it empty out, and what that'll do is that'll kind of naturally flush the plant, because most of the time that rainwater is also 0 parts per million, or at least really close. Sometimes it reads like a 10, but that'll help flush your plant kind of naturally, so you don't have to do it as often. So there we go. It's going down a little bit. We're down under 50 now. So we're just going to kind of keep doing this until we get this down under like 30, 20 range. Now, the way that I'm doing it here is kind of difficult. I have to keep emptying this out, which is kind of annoying. What you can do is you can actually like put this in a sink and just run water through it, so that you don't have to keep running the water through it. But that might be a little bit easier, or you can take it like outside on the ground and you can just pour the water in and just let the water run into the ground. And but what I do with this water is I actually will take this water and I'll water my other house plants that don't mind the minerals and the salts in the water. I wanted to show you this step because this is a step that a lot of new Venus flytrap growers don't follow, and what they don't realize is that the substrate that it's in is killing their Venus flytraps. Not necessarily quickly, but a lot of times the parts per million in the water, the salts and the minerals, is kind of a slow death. Don't have one of these, you're just kind of guessing. So I really recommend getting one of these. It's something that you'll definitely use in the future if you want to continue to collect Venus flytraps or other carnivorous plants. 31, I'm actually pretty happy with that. I can live with that. So what I'll do is the next time that it rains, I'll just go ahead and pull these out of their trays and let that rain continue to flush it. And hopefully with any luck, we'll continue to flush those down even more. And probably once or twice over the summer, what I'll do is I'll also give them a little flush from top watering when we don't have that much rain coming through. So I'll continue to flush these even after this process, probably like once a month, just to continue to keep those dissolved solids out. Sometimes when you have debris and things falling from trees in the sky, sometimes you can get a little collection of dissolved solids at the top. So you just need to top water to get those out as a process throughout the growing season. Yeah, these spiders are actually doing a pretty good job catching some critters that are climbing up the leaves because of all the water that's happening. So it's actually kind of neat watching these spiders catch. Out hunting, looking for any bugs that are crawling up. They're definitely attacking. They're in full attack mode. Pretty cool. Alright, I got them all flushed out. I have to watch some epic spider battles, which was interesting. And now they're all reading at a 30 or lower parts per million, which is well within acceptable reading. So I know it's kind of annoying, and a lot of people are probably like, what the heck, why do I have to do all this? But I promise you that your start to your Venus flytrap will go much smoother. You'll have way less repotting shock if you just flush these plants, if you're going to keep the substrate. And sometimes you may want to just keep them right in these little planters for now until dormancy. It's best to repot during dormancy. If you're going to keep them in these planters, this is an absolute necessary step that you're going to want to complete, so that you flush out all these minerals, these salts and everything. And I promise you there'll be much less shock, and they'll get off to a much better start when you start growing them at your home. All right, the next thing that we're going to talk about in regards to care for your Venus flytrap is your substrate. So this is the substrate that I'm using here. You can see it's a mix of peat moss, perlite, and silica sand. So this mix right here is actually 3 parts peat, 2 parts perlite, and about 1.5 parts sand. What you want is you want a substrate that's going to be well aerated and allows the water to go through it really easily. You don't want the water pooling up and sitting for a long period of time. You really ideally want your water to be able to completely go through the substrate. You want the perlite and the sand helps avoid the peat moss from bricking up too much. If it bricks up, the water doesn't go through it very well, and it's hard for the roots to get access to water all the time. So it's really important that you have a nice aerated substrate. A good alternative to this is long fiber sphagnum moss. That's also a great substrate. A couple of things I don't like about that is it dries out really quick when it's hot in the summer, and it's a little more expensive. You also have to repot more often because it breaks down a lot quicker than the peat moss mix does. So The pros of it is that it grows really big, beautiful, healthy Flytraps, and it's a simpler substrate in terms of just wrapping the roots up and then putting it in the planter. So it's a little bit easier to repot. It is harder to get the substrate off when you're going to repot, but as long as you're keeping your substrate healthy, you don't really have to worry about it as much. There's kind of some pros and cons. I actually have a video in the description if you want to check it out where I talk about all the pros and cons of peat moss versus long fiber sphagnum moss, so you can decide which is best for you. But this is definitely the most accessible. You can get all these right at like a Lowe's or a Home Depot. They don't have necessarily a carnivorous plant mix, but you can get the peat moss, the perlite, and you can get the silica sand. It's usually like a cement mix or a pool sand mix. The other thing is if you want to do the same thing with your substrate that I did with the Venus Flytraps, is all my substrate I always rinse and flush and make sure that I get the ppm down to under 30, just like I did with my plants, because a lot of times the store peat moss, when you flush it out, it has a lot of salt in it, and it can be around 200-300 parts per million. So just make sure you're also flushing your substrate. Okay, now I know we've already kind of done this a little bit, but we're going to talk about watering. Watering is one of the things that people really get wrong when they're doing Venus Flytrap care. One of the biggest things you want to avoid is tap water. Just completely avoid tap water altogether, unless you have a TDS meter. If you have a TDS meter and you can measure your tap water, and your tap water is coming in at below a 50 ppm, like around a 30, 20 ppm, then you're good to go. If you don't have a TDS meter, I would not risk it. A lot of people ask, well, what about well water? A lot of times well water will gather the salts and the minerals that's in the water or in the soil, so I still don't recommend, even if you have well water. So I really recommend getting a TDS meter. If you do not have a TDS meter, I absolutely say do not use tap water. What I recommend is every box store, big box store, they usually sell like a distilled water, so you can just go grab a gallon of distilled water. That'll measure 0. My best recommendation, and what I think is probably the best option, is the Zero water pitcher. The Zero water pitcher is fantastic. It does a really good job of filtering tap water, and depending how high your parts per million is in your tap water, you can get like 20-30 gallons of water just from one filter. And the pitcher you get to keep, and you just have to buy replacement filters. I think the replacement filters are like 15 bucks each, so you could realistically get 20-30 gallons of water for around 15 bucks after you've purchased the pitcher and the filter. And usually distilled water in the big box stores is around $1 a gallon anyway. So over the long term, you're actually saving quite a bit of money with the Zero water pitcher. It's my best friend when it comes to watering my carnivorous plant collection. I use them. I have 2 of them, and I have 2 of them running almost constantly, pouring me out filtered water, and they just work really great, and I really like them. For small carnivorous plant collections, it's almost a must go. You can have basically unlimited Zero water, or distilled. That's not distilled technically, it's filtered water, but you can basically have unlimited water, and it's always right there for you. Once you pour the water in the top, it filters it. It takes like maybe 5-10 minutes for the water to come through, and you have yourself some water for your Venus Flytrap, so you don't run out in the summer. If you run out, sometimes people use like tap water, and that's better than not using water at all and let them dry out, but it's still not very good for your plant, and you'll probably have to flush after using tap water. So having that Zero water pitcher around is great. Another option is like a water distiller. They're kind of slow and loud, and they put out a lot of heat, so I don't really care for those. You can also set up like an RO system, a reverse osmosis system that attaches to like a sink, and that does a great job of filtering water, but they're kind of expensive and a little bit harder. There's some installation required often, or you can get the tabletop versions, but the tabletop versions are very expensive. So usually when I'm telling people, if you have 1 or 2 or even 10 or 15 carnivorous plants, getting that Zero water pitcher is absolutely money. I'm at about 100 plants right now, and maybe even a little bit more than that. I haven't counted for a while, and I'm still using 2 pitchers to do all of my water for all my carnivorous plants. So I have to stay on top of it, but it's worth it always having it on hand. When I need it, it's there, and I can get it, no problem. Now let's talk real quick about how to water these. I strongly recommend tray watering. With tray watering, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to put your Venus Flytrap in the tray and then fill up the tray of water. I don't recommend top watering often. I recommend doing it maybe once a month, and that's really just to flush the Venus Flytrap. That's not necessarily to water it. And when you're flushing it, you're probably pulling it out of the tray so that the water runs out and it doesn't retain that water. If it's summertime and it's really hot, let's say between 85 and 100 degrees Fahrenheit, you're going to want to keep that tray full of water all the time. When it's that hot, your Venus Flytrap is running through the water a lot frequently, so it's probably a good idea just to keep that tray full. However, if you get to anywhere from like the 50 to 75, 80 degrees, especially at night times, I really recommend letting the plant dry out for a day or two between waterings, because if you constantly have water up around the crown of the plant, you can actually get crown rot. And I actually just lost one of my favorite Venus flytraps, my SD Chronos, to just that crown rot. Right now we're getting upper 40s, mid 50s at nighttime, and it's getting up to like 80 to 85 during the day. And I had to leave for a few days, so I overwatered all of these to make sure that they had water while I was gone. And I think the cold temperatures at night really made my plant susceptible to rot. Most of my other fly traps are fine, but it did kill my SD Chrono. So what you really want to do is you want to water the Venus flytraps during the day when it's hot, and then pull them out of the tray at night so that they can dry out a little bit, and then just put them back in their tray in the morning when the sun comes out. And that's when you have low temperatures at night and then high temperatures during the day. If you have high temperatures at night and day, you don't have to worry about that. You can just leave them in that tray and keep that tray full and allow them to just keep using that water, because they're going to be using it a lot in that 90 to 100 degree temperature range. One of the things with watering that you're really going to want to do is right after you water your plant, you put it in the tray, you leave it there for an hour, come feel the weight of your planter when it's full of water. Then right before you water the plant, feel it again and feel how light it is, and get used to that weight. And that way, every time you come up to your plant, you can actually pick it up and you'll know with 100% certainty whether or not that plant needs to be watered. So just knowing the weight of your planter is a really easy and efficient way to know when it needs to be watered. While you're learning the weight, what you can do is you can stick your finger in the substrate about an inch. If you feel water an inch down, you're probably okay. But if you don't feel any water about an inch down, you want to make sure and get water to the plant. Venus flytraps in their natural habitats, they like having water down by the roots, and then they like to have less water up around the crown. So there's always water accessible to the roots, less water up by the crown. Drier at the top, always wet at the bottom. Venus flytraps never ever like to be completely dried out. The roots always need access to water. So you want to be really careful and never let that plant go an inch down without having water. So it's okay for the top to dry out a little bit, but do not let it go more than an inch down without being some water in that substrate. All right, and real quick before we move on to the next section, I did want to show you how you can get your hands on some incredible Venus flytrap cultivars, or one of many other amazing carnivorous plants out there. Please check this out. I'm super pumped about teaming up with California Carnivorous. They're one of the most experienced and knowledgeable carnivorous plant nurseries in the entire world. They have a massive selection year-round of all types of carnivorous plants. There will definitely be something in their nursery you fall in love with. On top of that, they've also been generous enough to offer my viewers an exclusive 10% discount on their order when they enter CP Hub at checkout. That's CP Hub. Head on over and pick out yourself a new carnivorous plant to add to your collection. You know you deserve it. Let's go ahead and get back to the video. Another really common question that I see a lot is, what are the lighting requirements? And what I recommend for Venus flytraps, if possible, is to put them outside in full sun. The full sun will take care of the lighting requirements. You won't have to worry about any type of grow light or anything like that. Now, with that being said, when you have Venus flytraps like the ones that I have here in front of me, you can see that these ones are looking a little bit light starved. They look like they haven't been in light for a while, which makes sense because they probably had to go in a truck and then they had to arrive to the store. And even at the store, they've been kind of sitting in a room. They haven't been under lights. They haven't been out under the sun. So these ones are probably really sensitive to sun right now. So if I was to take these and put them in like 90-degree sun, it would probably burn them and they would probably die if I left them out in the sun all day. What you want to do is you want to acclimate these. So you want to put them out in the sun for maybe an hour or two, check on them the next day, make sure that they're doing okay. Do it again, put them in the sun for another hour or two, check them, make sure they're doing okay, and then continue to follow this process, and each week just increase it by an hour or two. So maybe next week you do 4 or 5 hours in the sun. Keep an eye on them at nighttime, make sure that they're not burning. It's okay for the Venus flytraps to start turning red in the center of the traps. That's actually what they're supposed to do. Like this one here has been exposed to more light than this one here. And that's exactly why that one is turning red. That's a good sign. That means this one has been getting enough light, more light than this one has been getting. So them turning red is a good sign. What you want to look for is if the leaves start turning like a brown reddish color or even a black, that means that they're getting too much sun, and it'll usually start kind of on the tip, on the edges here, and it'll start going in. If they get really burnt, the whole leaf will start to turn brown. So if you start to see that, just pull back and pull them out of the sun for a little bit. If you follow this process over 3 or 4 weeks, they'll acclimate, and then you can actually leave these out in the sun all day pretty much every day, even if you're getting in the temperatures above 100 degrees. Once they're acclimated to full sun, they do a really good job withstanding the really hot sun, even for kind of longer durations of time. If you live in like Texas or Arizona, where it gets really super hot and you're constantly over 100-degree temperatures, I might recommend leaving them in the morning to like 1-2 o'clock sun, and then that hot afternoon sun. Maybe put them under a shade cloth or pull them into the shade so they're not in that really hot 110 degree 115 degree temperatures all the time. I think over a sustained time that will start to burn them, so if it gets that hot, make sure and pull them out. But if you're looking at temperatures around 90 to like 103, 105, you're probably okay to leave them out in those temperatures all the time. As long as you're really staying on top of the watering, it's going to be really important in those temperatures that you're really on top of the watering, because they will dry out super quick if you're not giving them tons of water when it's that hot outside. All right, now let's talk about indoor lights and what you'll need to do for lighting to raise these indoors. Unfortunately, a windowsill is not going to be enough. I do occasionally see people argue with me that a windowsill might work, and I believe that there are some people out there that do get it to work, although I don't believe that probably long term that Venus flytraps will live entirely in a windowsill. One of the problems with windows, especially newer ones, is that they're made to filter out a lot of UV light, and that's really good for us and our skin and for humans, but the big problem is that that's not good for the plants. Sometimes if somebody has a really old window and it's southern facing and it's getting that 8 to 10 hours a day, that just might work, but unfortunately that's just not the case with most windowsills. What I'm going to recommend here is I'm going to recommend 3 different grow lights, and they're all grow lights that I use personally and that I've tested and that I know work. There are other grow lights out there that work, but these are the 3 that I prefer. One is a Corée grow light. It's a 100-watt grow light. It's a square and it covers like a 2x2 or 3x3 area. This is a great grow light. It's super powerful and it's going to do a really good job with Venus flytraps, especially if you put the flytraps right in the middle, with the light being about anywhere from probably 12 to 16 inches away. And the nice thing about this light is, since it covers a 3x3 area, what you can do is, if you have other carnivorous plants that need a little bit less light, you can kind of put them on the outside of the Venus flytraps, and it'll do a good job of giving those plants a little bit of light as well. Say maybe like a ping or a nepenthes, or even maybe like a sundew. You can put those on sort of the outside of the Venus flytraps and it'll cover a large area and you get a lot of coverage. Now, if you only have maybe 1 Venus flytrap or 2, I might recommend like a Sansi 36-watt grow light. These are a really powerful grow bulb, and it's kind of nice because it's an E26 socket and it just plugs into any regular lamp. What you can do is you can get these really cheap clamp lights to for a shop, and you can just plug it in there and these will clamp to anything. It's really nice. They're super convenient. You can put them anywhere. And then this is really good for maybe 2 or 3 tops. This light is really good. You probably want to keep your Venus flytraps about a foot away from them, but the problem is they don't have a great coverage area. So you really want your 1 or 2, maybe 3 Venus flytraps right under that light, anywhere from probably 10 to 12 inches away. And anything on the outside of it is probably not going to get enough light, especially in terms of a Venus flytrap. Another light that I like to use, this is a light that comes in either a 2-foot or a 4-foot bulb, more like a T8 or T5 light. These aren't bulbs, but they're sort of in that shape. These are LED lights. It's a Barina grow light. And these are new to me, and I've only been using them for about a month now, but they're doing a really good job. They're really coloring up my Venus flytraps, and I'm actually going to be doing part 2 of a review on these soon, and I can't wait to do it because I'm really going to give these my seal of approval, because they've done such an amazing job. They've really colored up my pings, and I've done a really good job of coloring up some Venus flytraps that I picked up from Lowe's, just as kind of a test for these lights. The flytraps are turning a really nice shade of red, and they're just looking really good and healthy. So these Barina grow lights are great. Like if you have any wire shelving, or you want to put these on any type of shelving, these are a really good option for that, because they can cover either a 4-foot shelf or a 2-foot shelf. What I like to do is, for most shelves, I'll put 2 of these together, and that provides almost, I think it was like 48 watts of total output when you have 2 of them together. So that's a really nice amount of wattage of light, and that'll be definitely strong enough for your Venus flytraps. I keep my flytraps probably about 6 to 8 inches away from the Barina grow lights. You do that a little bit closer because they are just a little less powerful. I do have a link to all these lights in the description, so if you want to go check them out, see prices, you want to see how they look, you want to see some user reviews, so you don't want to just believe myself, by all means go check them out and see if you like them. All those links right there in the description, like I said. Alright, if you're enjoying this video, finding the content useful, please make sure to like and subscribe to my channel. Liking this video, subscribe to my channel. All those things are really helpful to me. You can also support my dream of opening a carnivorous plant nursery by clicking the thanks button below the video. That'll give you the opportunity to leave like a monetary contribution. You get your comment highlighted, and that's something that I really appreciate, but I also understand that money's tight. If you don't have any money to give me, that's no problem. Just liking the video, subscribing to my channel, watching the video all the way to the end, leaving a comment, engaging in some conversation. All that stuff really helps me out, and I really appreciate it. You can also download my free plant tracker and care sheet. Those are things that can also assist me. So there's a lot of different ways you can help me without having to spend any money. I really appreciate you being here. Let's go ahead and get back to the video. One of the most common inquiries or questions that I get most frequently is in regards to feeding Venus flytraps. I mean, let's face it, the allure of Venus flytraps, really what attracts us to these plants is the way that they eat insects. That's one of the coolest things about them, and I completely get it. Feeding a Venus flytrap an insect for the first time is really an amazing thing. And to be quite honest, it was the exact same thing that attracted to me to these plants when I was a kid. So what I want to do is I want to give you some information. I want to show you how to feed them, kind of give you an idea of what to feed them a little bit, when to feed them, so that you're doing it the right way and making sure that we're doing it the best for the Venus flytrap care. Feeding the Venus flytraps is really important to a lot of people, and I get it, because that's one of the things that's one of the reasons people will get a Venus flytrap, is they want to feed it a live bug and watch it actually do its magic. Let's start by putting the Venus flytraps outside. If your Venus flytrap is outside, I kind of hate to break it to you, but you probably don't need to feed them. They're actually a really highly efficient hunting machine, and they do a great job of catching insects all by themselves. And what I find is that when my Venus flytraps are outside, they frequently have every trap closed and is eating a bug. So there's not really a lot that I need to do to help the Venus flytrap eat. They just do a really good job of hunting by themselves. So not a lot for you to do. However, if you want to feed a Venus flytrap, you certainly can. Obviously, if you have kids, that's one of what's kids really like, watching Venus flytraps catch insects. It's intriguing to them, and it might spark an interest and a passion in them that'll last for a lifetime. So I do think that feeding your Venus flytraps is really important, especially when you're showing your kids, or you're showing maybe friends that come over, family. It's really a cool thing, and it's a fun thing to share with people. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you're feeding them the right kind of insects. Obviously, they're flytraps. A normal housefly is one of the best kind of insects that you can get. You want to find an insect that's not too squishy and soft, but it's also not too hard with a really tough exterior. So you're looking for something like a fly. Mealworms are really good. You can even go with like a wasp or a yellow jacket, something like that. They do pretty good with those, especially if the trap is big enough. You want to make sure whatever insect that you pick, you want to make sure that that insect is no bigger than about 1/3 to 1/2 the size of the trap, because these traps have to close entirely and form a seal in order to release the digestive enzyme. All right, I'm going to get in close here so you can see this. You see those 3 little hairs right there? Those are the mechanisms that need to be triggered for a Venus flytrap to close. Usually there's an initial trigger, and then the second trigger needs to happen for the trap to actually close. These plants are smart enough to watch for fail-safes, like a raindrop or a leaf falling in. That initial hit won't actually trigger it. It needs to be triggered twice within a close time frame of each other. So once the insect lands here, it triggers the first one, and then it triggers the second one, and boom, it snaps shut. Now, in order for a Venus flytrap to actually seal and digest the plant, what needs to happen is those trigger hairs on the inside need to continue to be triggered. So the bug on the inside is going to struggle and try to get out. While doing that, they're going to trigger a secondary response. The Venus flytrap will release a digestive enzyme, and it will actually digest the insect. Now, if you feed a Venus flytrap a dead bug, the problem is that you don't get that secondary response. If a Venus flytrap closes because of a leaf or a drop of water, something like that, they know that they can't use a whole bunch of energy and release their digestive enzyme and sealing if they're not going to get anything out of it. So what they'll do is they wait for that secondary response on the inside to trigger them to actually start the digestive process. So if you're feeding a Venus flytrap a dead bug, what you want to do is you want to pinch the outside of it a little bit after the trap has closed, very gently. That'll help trigger a secondary response. Another thing you can do is you can actually put some fishing line inside the flytrap, coming out both ends, and when the insect is inside of there and it closes, you can just simply move that fishing line up and down very gently, and then once you feel confident, after you do that for about a minute, very gently just pull that fishing string out, and the flytrap should have triggered the secondary response and begun the digestive process. I do have a full video on feeding Venus flytrap dead bugs, so make sure and check that out if you're interested in how that works. But preferably you want to feed them live insects, and like I said, mealworms, crickets, flies. Check out in the description, I do have a list of bugs I recommend and bugs I don't recommend. I recommend staying away from like earthworms. Earthworms aren't good. I fed my Venus flytrap on an earthworm one time and it actually rotted it completely within like a couple of days. So that was a terrible idea. It's just too much goo. And then also really hard-shelled beetles, like those big black beetles, anything like that that's got a really hard shell, that it'll trigger the secondary response and it'll close, but the Venus flytrap just doesn't get enough out of that insect to make it worth your while. So you can do that and it'll work, but the Venus flytraps just don't get much nutrition out of those, so I would probably avoid it. So yeah, it's not absolutely necessary to feed your Venus flytrap insects. If you put it outside, really all they need is the sun to live. The insects are more like a fertilizer to them, so it's not really 100% necessary, but you can definitely do that if you want. I don't think that there's really a hard limit on the amount of bugs you can feed a Venus flytrap. I know there's kind of a rumor going around that says, hey, you can only feed one trap, an insect every 30 days, or you can feed 2 different flytraps and an insect every 30 days, but put your Venus flytrap outside and see what happens. I guarantee you that it's not going to just stop after it eats one. Every flytrap eventually will be closed that's capable of closing. The plant will be feasting on those insects, and anytime I've had my plants do that, the plants have absolutely thrived. So I just don't think there's a lot of truth to only feed your Venus flytrap one insect per trap every 30 days or 2 weeks or whatever. Just if there's a trap that's open, I'm a firm believer in it can probably eat. Okay, let's talk about Venus flytrap dormancy. If you ask me personally, I think dormancy is one of the most annoying things about Venus flytraps, because there's a whole 12 to 14 week time frame where you just don't get to have them, and they kind of go into a dormant stage. Some of them die off, they get a little sickly looking, and it's just kind of unfortunate, but it is necessary. A common misconception with Venus flytraps is that they're a tropical plant and they need to be in high humidity and they need to be in tropical conditions. That is just so far from the truth. They actually grow natively in a very small part of North Carolina, and that's the only place that they grow natively in the entire world. So they actually do go through a cold period in North Carolina where they do need a dormant period. In that dormant period, they store up energy in their rhizome to build up so that they can come back strong for the next growing season. So what you need to do is, with your Venus flytrap, you need to make sure that your Venus flytrap is getting anywhere from, it needs to be under 50 degrees Fahrenheit or around 50 degrees Fahrenheit for the plant to slow down its growth and go into a dormant stage. You want to avoid anything over 30 degrees or under 30 degrees for prolonged periods of time. And just as a note, everything that I'm speaking to today is Fahrenheit. I'm sorry, I'm not very good with Celsius, so everything I'm speaking to is Fahrenheit, so you might have to do a conversion if you're not familiar with Fahrenheit. But you do want to make sure that you're keeping them above 32 degrees. They can go under 32 degrees. They can go into freezing temperatures for short periods of time, but they shouldn't be in freezing temperatures for prolonged amounts of time. Venus flytraps are actually really durable and they're really cold hardy, and I've had mine go through temperatures of like 10-15 degrees, but it's only for a couple days at a time. I try really hard that if it's going to be that cold, that I'll bring them inside for a little bit, and just during the periods that it's going to be that cold, you can't bring them in for a long time because it'll kick them out of dormancy. However, what I recommend is, if you have a room in your house that's unheated, that is your best option, because you can kind of control the temperatures in that room and you can get it down somewhere between that 32 and 50 degrees and keep it there. And that's really what's best for Venus flytraps for dormancy. If you don't have access to that, what you can do is you can get like a cold frame and then you can insulate them. Once you get down under 35 degrees, you really don't need to give them any more light. You can completely shut them out from light. You can cover them with like a plant weathering cloth, and then you can add some pine needles or some mulch on top, and then you can keep them out in really cold temperatures as long as they're insulated, and they'll survive through the winter. You can also, if it snows, you can leave the snow on the Venus flytraps, because that's just another form of really nice insulation. So there is ways to kind of do this with dormancy. One of the best tips that I can give with dormancy is reach out to somebody locally that you know grows Venus flytraps in your area. So get on Facebook and join like a local group and talk to the people that live in your area and how they tackle dormancy specifically to their areas. People that have done it successfully. I can't give you specific directions on how to go through dormancy in every part of the country, in every part of the world, and in every situation. I haven't grown them enough in every area to know specifically how to give them the proper dormancy. I can give you some ideas and some tips, but I can't give you good, solid, professional advice because I just haven't done it. So I would try really hard to talk to people in your area that have done it that can give you that really good solid advice. The other thing is that when you are watering your plants when they're in dormancy is you have to way cut back on the water when the temperatures are that cold. You can't have your Venus flytraps sitting in water all winter. You're begging to have them go through crown rot. If you're tray watering them, once the tray goes dry, leave that plant for a while and go ahead and feel the substrate and maybe the weight of your pot like we talked about earlier, but understand the water in the plant and don't just keep the tray full, because I can promise you, you will lose plants to dormancy if you keep them in a tray of water all winter at 35 to 40 degrees. It's just too cold. And the plants really don't like to be in water that often. So you really got to let them dry out. Sometimes it's like 2, 3, even 4 weeks in between watering. It feels really wrong, especially if you're just coming off of summer. But I promise you, you're going to want to familiarize yourself with the water in the planter and not just go off of the water in the tray, because you will kill a Venus flytrap if you give them too much water during dormancy. If you guys have any questions about dormancy, go ahead and throw them in the comments. Dormancy is tricky. It can be really difficult to know exactly what to do. I'll do my best to help you out. I promise I'll try really hard to answer all your questions, but if it's something I can't answer, I might recommend that you reach out to somebody locally and get some really good tips from a local grower, somebody who has experience in your specific area that knows what to do. Okay, I promise we're going to be doing some repotting. See, it's still here. I know this video is dragging on a little bit, but at the same time, all this information that I'm giving you is really important if you want to successfully grow Venus flytraps. So I'm sorry that it's dragging out, but I just want to make sure that we cover all the topics here, and I don't want to shortchange you on anything. And hopefully you're enjoying the video, and hopefully this information is good. But let's talk about real quick planters and what you want to put them in, because that's also important. You really want to shoot for something that's like plastic or resin. Like, see both of these, this is a big plastic, this is like a resin hard plastic, and this is kind of a softer, just regular plastic. The reason you want to go with the plastic is because they don't leach any minerals or any nutrients, any salts or anything into the water. So if you use like a terracotta planter or a clay pot that doesn't have a glazed on the outside, the problem is that those will not only absorb water into those pots, but they'll also leach minerals and salts into your water. If you put water in a brand new terracotta planter and you measure that water with a TDS meter after about an hour, you'll see that thing shoot up really high. Those are that TDS, as we already talked about, is what's kind of harmful to your Venus flytrap. So you really want to avoid any type of terracotta or clay. Clay's okay if it's glazed. Also, some terracotta plants are okay if you've had them for a long time and they've already kind of leached out all the nutrients and the salts. But make sure you're testing it with a TDS meter with water. Leave the water in it overnight. Test it. If you're getting a good reading, then you're probably okay. But for beginners, I just recommend going with something that's more plastic or resin. There's some really cool plastic and resin planters out there that you can get. The other thing is you want to make sure, we'll talk about this paper towel here in a minute, but you want to make sure you have something with holes in the bottom. You want really good drainage, and you want to make sure that this planter is able to absorb water really well from your tray. And you want to make sure that if you're top watering it, that these holes are big enough and good enough so that water can run right through the bottom, because the Venus flytraps do not like to be sitting in muddy, wet, boggy conditions all the time. So make sure you're using plastic or resin. Make sure that the holes in the bottom are good and big enough so that you get really good aeration and water flow, because otherwise if that Venus flytrap collects a lot of water, especially up around the top, you're going to expose it to possible crown rot. And I promise crown rot is a real thing. I get people argue with me all the time saying, hey, I keep my Venus flytraps in water all the time. I understand. I know that it's okay because all of my other Venus flytraps were okay under the same conditions, but you will lose a Venus flytrap to crown rot if you just keep them in water all the time in super muddy, boggy conditions. They do not grow in really wet bogs. That's just not true. It's just not really how they grow. Okay, the last thing we're going to talk about real quick here before we go into actually repotting is propagation. You can actually propagate these with flower stalk cuttings. I've done that a lot. I have a lot of really good detailed videos on flower stalk cuttings, so check that out. Link in the description if you want to see some of those. You can also pull off the leaves, and if you pull off the leaf with a little bit of that rhizome attached to it, you can actually either bury these in your substrate, or you can just lay them down on a like on top of the substrate and keep it really nice, wet and moist, high humidity. These don't need high humidity all the time, but when you're propagating either leaf pullings or when you're propagating the flower stalk cuttings, that's also a good time where you want to keep it really high until they strike. And then once they strike and start growing, then you can kind of pull back the humidity a little bit and then give them kind of care like you normally do. But all that information is in my propagation video. The other thing that you can do is you can actually let the flower stalks grow, and then you can get seeds from Venus flytraps. Now, I will warn, with flower stalks, there's a couple of reasons why I don't like doing this. One, the flower stalk will take away energy, and your flytraps will not grow as big and as beautiful as they could if you left the flower stalk there. The flower stalks do absorb a lot of energy from the plant because the plant is putting all of its energy toward reproducing. I recommend, if your goal is just to have really big, beautiful fly traps and you don't really care about the flower is kind of plain, it's beautiful, but it is really just kind of a plain white flower. It's nothing super spectacular. I recommend snipping that flower stalk off as soon as you see it, or you can maybe wait till it's an inch or so big, maybe 2 inches, you can cut it and then propagate it. One thing that's important to note, if you seed your Venus flytraps and you have like a really nice cool cultivar, that cultivar, that is not a genetic reproduction of that plant. The seeds can have different genetic properties. So if you say you have a really beautiful alien Venus flytrap and you let it seed and the seeds come out and you got the seeds, those won't necessarily be alien Venus flytraps, and you can't label them as such because that's just not the way the seeds work. In order for Venus flytraps to produce via seed, they actually do have to pollinate with a different plant. It requires cross-pollination. They do not self-pollinate. So it's really important, if you don't really care about the type of Venus flytrap that comes out of it, and you just want to grow a flower and you want to see some seeds and you want to seed grow some Venus flytraps, cool. Absolutely, you just can't label that new Venus flytrap as an alien or whatever your cultivar is. When you pull a leaf or you pull a flower, you cut a flower, those are genetic reproductions of the plant. That it will be an identical plant, so you can say this is an alien or this is whatever your cultivar is. So that's one thing to kind of important and to know. But check out my propagation videos. I got a lot more information about that. Propagation is just a lot of fun. Venus flytraps take a long time to grow. They can take like 2 to 4 years to become fully grown. So it's kind of a process you need to follow but you have to be really, really patient. They do not grow quickly. So there's a lot to it, but it is a lot of fun. So maybe check those videos out if you're interested. Okay, so let's go ahead and get to repotting. We're going to talk about the planter here and the paper towel that I have in there in just a second. I'll explain to you why that's in there. But first, what I'm going to try to do is I'm trying really hard to get these out with most of their substrate attached to them, because I'm going to try to leave a lot of the substrate in there. Now sometimes when you're pulling out peat moss, sometimes the peat moss just kind of chunks out and falls off, so it may or may not be possible, but we're going to go ahead and kind of see what happens here while we're pulling these out. You want to try to be careful, and you want to try not to trigger all the traps, but it's almost impossible sometimes not to trigger some of them, if not all of them, so don't be too upset if you do. The plant does use up a little bit of energy closing its traps, but it's not the end of the world. The plant will recover even if it does close a few traps while you're doing this process. It's actually pretty hard to do this without closing a few traps. All right, let's see what we got here. I'm gonna pry it out a little bit. One of the main things you want to do is you want to try your best to keep as many roots intact as possible. Here we go. See, there's the roots. See, it's got actually a really healthy root right here, that little white tip on the end. That means that that's a really, really healthy root. You can see how long the roots are. And I'm not going to mess with these a lot. In some of my other videos, you've seen me kind of clean this all off, but these are growing so well and they're so healthy, I just don't see a reason to do that. So I'm just going to kind of leave it like this. Oh, I lost a lot of the substrate on that one. That's okay though. So there you can see some of those nice white tipped roots there. That's what we're looking for. It's a good healthy root system. There we go. Oh, see how it's just kind of chunking off there? Some roots. There we go. There's that white root again. So that makes me happy seeing that the roots are still really white, or the white tips on the roots. I don't know if you can see that there. Right there, that's a really good sign, seeing that white on the tips of those roots like that. So, okay, so here's my planter. You can see I have a lot of substrate that I need to put in here. The way you repot Venus flytraps, it's kind of a few different steps in the process. So, what you want to do is you want to make sure, like we talked about earlier, you got really good holes in the bottom. You can see I drilled a bunch of extra holes. I drilled a bunch of extra holes in the bottom of here, just to make sure that it has really, really good drainage. And then you want to put a paper towel that covers all your holes on the bottom. And the reason that you want to do that is that'll make sure that you don't get any of these chunks of perlite stuck in your holes, and that water stops coming up. And the paper towel will keep constant contact with the water, and it'll wick it up into the soil. So you always have really good water flow through your holes so they don't get plugged up. So that paper towel is just kind of an extra step to help protect your water flow, to make sure that those holes don't get clogged up, and it also helps wick up that water up into the soil. So what you want to do for this first layer, probably for about 1/4 of your plant, you want this first layer to be pretty compact. Once we get up a little bit higher, we won't push the soil down really compact, but this one here, If you get this really compact, what'll happen is it'll force that paper towel down into the bottom and have constant contact with those holes. So you're always making sure that you're getting a lot of wicking action with that water coming up. So get this bottom part nice and compact. Okay, now next, what we're gonna do is we are going to dump in some more substrate. Let's go ahead and get this down in here. Now, you don't want to completely fill it yet, because you want to make sure that kind of compact it down just a little bit so you don't have a lot of holes in here. You want to make sure to have as few of holes as possible. You can see the sand in there. Now, I'm not going to push this layer down really hard, because if you push it down really hard, what will happen is it can brick up, and then your roots won't be able to grow down. The Venus flytrap roots really like to grow down, so you want to keep this upper layer above that compact lower layer to be kind of loose. Firm but loose, if that makes any sense. Oh no! Okay, now what I want to do is, that's really not good enough. I want to actually bring this up above, almost mound it just a little bit. So I'm going to get a spoon here and scoop. It doesn't look like there's a lot of perlite in that, because the perlite's dirty. The soil's really nice and wet. That's another thing I didn't really talk about. You want to make sure that you wet your soil down first, because it's really hard to work with if you don't wet it down. And it also doesn't absorb water very well. It takes a while to absorb water. So if you put this in here dry, it'll take forever to absorb the water, and it's seriously a huge pain. So you want to make sure and really wet down your soil. You'll probably have to wet down your soil anyway, because you're probably rinsing it like we talked about, right? Now, one of the reasons I like to put the soil up above the brim here a little bit and kind of mound it is that when you start watering it from the top a little bit, or if a rainstorm comes through, this soil is going to settle into the planter a little bit, and it's going to lower a little bit. And what you don't want to happen is, you don't want your plants to be way down below this rim, because that can impact the amount of sun that they're getting, and I just don't like it to go way down below the rim. So compact this down just a little bit, not super tight. You want this to be fairly loose up here. Okay, so I'm actually going to take the knife, and I'm going to, now I want to put 4 in here, so I'm looking at probably what, see, I could go 1, 2, 1, 2, and keep them out of the middle. I'll probably just do that. So let's go ahead, and we're going to put a hole here, and this is another reason that you want your soil to be wet, because if your soil's not wet, this is a really difficult process with peat moss, because it'll just kind of keep falling down into the hole. And you want your hole to be pretty deep, because you want your roots to go down as far as possible. That's a pretty deep hole. It's probably about 5 or 6 inches. We need our holes to be just a little bit bigger at the top than they do at the bottom, because we got these kind of plugs that we're putting in there. This is not a perfect science, so these may not be perfect, and that's okay. Nothing about this really needs to be perfect, unless you're really worried about it, then perfect away. But I'm not going to be, because after a few months anyway, this whole planter is just going to be chaos. You know, I'm actually going to pause the video real quick. This is a really good time to trim these up, all this dead stuff off. So I'm going to do that real quick. I don't need to bore you with all that. So I'm just going to trim off some of these dead ones, and then I'll be right back to get to it. All right, I got most of that old dead growth off. I don't really want any of that. The old dead growth, it can promote crown rot, which is something you really don't want. It can kind of grow, it can get moldy and kind of gross, and then it can kind of rot. So there we go. So check that out. You want to bury these about up to the rhizome, just above the rhizome. You don't want that rhizome sticking out too much. And as you can see, these are already actually buried pretty good. So I just kind of want to bury them up to where they were already buried, like that. There we go. One down. Well, guys, this is really embarrassing and actually really frustrating, and I'm really sorry. The last thing that you saw here, I was planting this one. I've been talking for about 10 minutes and realized that I did not turn my camera on, so you kind of missed me putting all of these 3 into the ground, which is fine, because I basically followed the same process as when I put this one into the ground. So let me just cover a little bit of what I was talking about, next steps and what I'm going to be doing. Follow the same process that I used for putting this one in the ground. Exact same thing for putting those 3 into the ground. Again, I'm so sorry that I missed that, but it's really not important for you to see me put those 3 in after you already saw me put that one in. It's really just the same process over and over. The one thing you did miss, though, is I just got done watering these from the top. Really important to make sure and water these from the top. You can see how the perlite is showing here. Remember I told you there's perlite, you just couldn't see it very good. So the perlite is in there, but that's from me top watering these. What you want to do is the roots aren't touching the sides of the soil very well, so when you top water, it kind of collapses that water or that substrate down around the roots, and it makes sure that this really settles around those roots really good. So make sure you're top watering. As you're top watering, you might start to see some holes pop up. Just kind of fill those in with a little bit of substrate from the side. That's perfectly fine, just something like that. Make sure when you're doing this process that you have something like this underneath. I have this container here. You can see it's got a lot of water in it. If you freshly rinsed your soil, it'll be dripping a lot of water. So make sure you have something underneath to catch that water, whether it's a towel or a container. My next steps for growing this and what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking this outside and I'm going to be acclimating it to the sun very slowly. For the first day, I'll probably take it out for 1 to 2 hours, keep an eye on it, take a look, see how it does. If it looks like it's doing really well, I'll take it back out the next day for maybe 30 minutes to an hour more, and then just keep kind of ramping it up as time goes on and as it seems like it's staying really healthy. These do like to be in full sun eventually, so just keep ramping that up until you can give them as much sun as you can possibly give them. Allow them to start catching plants, and they're going to do really well. One of the reasons I like these big planters is they do a really good job of absorbing the water and holding the water. They hold water a lot better than these little tiny guys. These dry out so quick, so you have to be constantly watering them. I have this giant tray here that I'm going to keep full all the time, and once it gets really hot, and it'll keep this really nice and wet, especially down at the bottom where the roots are. And with these big planters like this, you can keep the water in the tray a lot longer because the water doesn't get as high as the rhizome as much, so it stays down in the bottom a lot more. So the other thing that I really like about these giant planters is they do a really good job of insulating your plant in the wintertime. So if you hit like below 32 degrees very often and get into those freezing single-digit temperatures, the insulation that's provided in here just from being in a bigger planter is significant. If you have a little tiny planter like this, you got no insulation, and odds are the cold will kill the plant if it's not overwintered really well. So there's a lot of pros to this. One of the cons is that it takes a ton of water to water this. You have to keep this full a lot, and it's a lot of substrate to keep wet. So that's probably the biggest con, but overall it's really fun growing them in pots this big. If you buy 3 or 4 and throw them in a pot this big, then you're only taking care of one plant. It's kind of nice to have them all in one place and together. But yeah, so that's kind of my plan. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel. I'm definitely going to be giving you updates on this planter, whether it does good, whether it does bad. Either way, I'm going to show you kind of what happened and what's going on with it. I'd be a liar if I said that it always goes well with my Venus flytraps, because I live in an area that's kind of hard to grow Venus flytraps, so it doesn't always go perfect and it doesn't always go well. And I like to share those failures with you as much as I like to share the successes, because it's good to know that there's other people out there too that are failing with Venus flytraps sometimes just because it's so common. But if you've made it this far in the video, I just want to thank you so much for sitting here with me. Let you know how much I appreciate it. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel. All that stuff really helps me. I really want to start a carnivorous plant nursery someday. I want to start selling plants like this to you guys, and all the things that I'm doing now sort of steps in and going in that direction. So if you want to leave me a monetary contribution, hit that thanks button below the video. That really helps me out watching all my videos. Also, if you want to check out a video of me getting these Venus flytraps and kind of how I got them, where I got them, and talking about them, it was kind of my haul video. You can check out the video right here. It should be popping up for you. And thanks so much for being here, and I really hope to catch you in my next video. Bye.